Who has buried the hoard is the big question. Hoards are problematic because what you're finding are the ones that were never recovered, and probably most people who buried coin hoards who intended to recover them did recover them. You can pretty much bury hoards for two reasons. It can be a religious deposit to the gods which is buried with the aim of not recovering, or it's a deposit that you're aiming to come back and make good on at some later stage. And no doubt a lot of people did, but as archaeologists we can't find hoards that have already been recovered, because all you're going to find is the hole in the ground. So we only ever find the evidence of the ones that have never been recovered. So in a way you get a slightly unrealistic proportion. The only example I know of a hoard that was successfully recovered is Samuel Pepys in his diary. Samuel Pepys was involved in the Admiralty, and he knew because of his contacts that there was about to be a Dutch invasion. So he spent his days shoring up the country's defences. No, he went round all of his mates collecting debts, making sure they paid in gold, taking all of his money out of the bank that he could do, and basically gave them to his wife and told her to sort of travel to the other end of the country and bury it in her father's garden for safekeeping until the crisis had passed. And at the end of it, the Dutch actually never invaded, so they were able to recover the gold and everything went on as normal. And that's probably what a lot of people are doing, that these hoards are being buried for safekeeping. But there is always an assumption that people do this, and the reason the hoard has not been collected is that somebody has come along and bashed the guy who buried the hoard on the top of the head, and at the very least he's lost his memory and has never been able to come back and collect his hoard. But there are lots of other possibilities that you can look at, and one thing is that looking at the evidence of the area, we do have a lot of soldiers passing through. There doesn't seem to be a lot of a military presence in the area, but with Watling Street passing throughout the 4th century, you have got troop movements up and down the area. You've got retired soldiers living in the area, and if you were a high up member of the army, when you retired you would be receiving back pay, and you would be getting several years, so you would be receiving gold coins. We have a very big hoard, so I suspect it's unlikely, but it's just about possible that you're looking at a military guy who has retired and has buried his money for safekeeping, and at very short notice has found himself called back up and sent somewhere else. And if at the time we're looking at, if this hoard is buried around 410, you could have a guy who's retired from the army in Britain and just at the end is then recalled to the continent because they need troops back there, and he doesn't get the time to go back to his burial point to recover his gold, isn't able to take the coins with him, and goes on to the continent, and then because Britain is lost to the Roman Empire and there's no regular troops back, he isn't able to recover his funds. That's a possibility. That's the cavalry tombstone from Colchester, just to prove we do get soldiers going through the region. This is the tombstone of Regina, who is the only known slave of the Cativalorni tribe. She was a slave, we presume she lived locally, but she met a man named Barates who bought her, freed her, married her and went into business with her. We know that because the pair of them's tombstones have been found up on Hadrian's Wall. And Barates was basically a cloth merchant, and they were selling cloths to the legionaries upon Hadrian's Wall. But Barates is interesting because when he dies and when his wife died, he puts the Latin inscription at the bottom, but below it there's another one down here in Palmyrene, and he comes from Syria. So you've got a merchant who's travelled all the way across the Roman Empire from one end to the other. Must have been a bit of a culture shift ending up on Hadrian's Wall, I would imagine. But there was business there, business to be made, so he went. And we do know you get merchants buying shiploads of goods and going around coasts, selling off stuff and then buying more load and going on to the next town. And if you've got the same thing going on inland, especially in the 4th century, if you're crossing Britain, the roads are becoming dangerous, the troops have gone, you might be robbed, you don't want to be carrying a huge amount of gold around with you, so you don't put all your eggs in your one basket. You bury some, you take some with you, and then you've got money to spend and you've got some to recover next time you come back. and it's possible that this is a merchant's burial, that you're looking at money that's been put away for safekeeping, so that next time he comes down he can recover it. And again, for some reason he never comes back. Maybe he flees the province, maybe he's killed, maybe he comes back and the apple tree he buried it under has turned into an orchard and he never has any time to find it again. So it's a possibility. The third possibility, which, well, your guess is as good as mine, but this is possibly the most likely, that we're dealing with not necessarily a senator, what we see here, but a wealthy member of the Roman elite who owns land in Britain. And we know from the Turners Hall farm burial that we are looking at wealthy Britons, amongst others, who own large estates in the southeast of Britain. We know that the farming estates are often a couple of hundred acres. They're as big as the sort of 18th, 19th century farms. We know that the wealth of Britain was based on crops, and if you owned this land and you were exporting it, you were paying your taxes, but the rest of it you sell on. What profit you make is yours. And there are clearly rich, wealthy landowners in the area who are living in the villa sites. Turners Hall Farm, this is a mid-2nd century burial, and already we're looking at individuals who are being buried with high quality status goods. There's silver, there's high quality metalwork going in. Interestingly, some of these objects, this little strainer bowl and this, are very Celtic, so it does look like these are actual Britons who'd stayed, kept their position of power in society. They'd simply Romanised. Instead of living in their roundhouses, they were living in Roman villas. They just paid their tax to the man at the top, but they still kept most of their estates, and they were making a very nice profit out of it. And it's very easy to construct a circumstance in the 4th century whereby you're looking at one of the wealthy villa owners in the area. By the 4th century, with the troops out, living on a big villa estate in the countryside with all your wealth is becoming more dangerous. So if you're rich, you may well own estates across Europe. So it's much safer to move your family and yourself back to the mainland somewhere where you've still got the troops around, where you've still got protection. And then you simply leave your British estates operating, because Britain's producing an awful lot of crops. You don't want to get rid of it, you don't want to just throw it away. So you leave it running with a foreman, but the foreman's got to have some money to keep the whole business going. So again, there's a supply of money put away to one side for the foreman to make use of. And really, I talked about Magnus Maximus, the general who came across from Britain. There had been periods from about 390 up to 410 when there were troops were being withdrawn from Britain, and there would be no troops for a number of years, and then troops would return. So in 408, 410, with troops going, you may well expect that this will be a temporary thing, a blip, and in a few years' time the troops will come back. So you move out, you leave that money behind, and when the troops come back, you go back in to collect it all again. And of course, on this occasion, Britain never rejoins the empire, so those troops never come back, and you're never able to come back and collect your money. So that may be another reason why we're seeing it. At the end of the day, any option you can come up with is just as likely, because the sad thing is nobody ever writes in these hoards, I have buried these coins because, on a little piece of metal that will tell you. One final thing and then I will stop. The hoard is, there's a lot more analysis to do. We were looking at a moment ago with the metal weights. There is a bit of variation, so there's more to be found out about them. But one curious thing is that most of them, as I said, are in very good condition, and essentially that is what you would tend to expect with gold if it's circulating in this way that I've discussed. Because what I think is happening is these coins are being issued, and then they have gone into a store. And what I think has happened is that the Mint of Milan has simply produced a whole lot, and those coins have travelled to Britain, and they may have done that with a military unit. They've come across to pay some of the troops, and they've basically been made at the Mint. They've been given to a bunch of to a legion. Those coins have been kept in a strong box. They've been carried across Europe. They've come to Britain. They've probably ended up at Verulamium, and somewhere in the Forum there's a strong room there which acts as the bank for keeping the money and is guarded, and that money has been kept in that store. And because Verulamium is a big market town, there are other people who have got gold coins, and I did say that it's only meant to be for tax reasons, but we know from the jewellery that's being made that people do get hold of these coins and use them for other things. And so I suspect that the reason why we've got the outlier coins from Constantinople and Thessalonica and Leon is that those coins are ones and twos, dribs and drabs, where people have actually again carried them with them from those provinces, ended up in Britain, needed to deposit them in a safe place in the town, and they've all gone into this big store area. And then one day our villa owner has come along and said, I want to withdraw my savings from this. So they've scooped up a big pile of the coins, and most of those coins just happen to be Milan issue ones, because that's where the vast majority of that store of coins has. But there are a few outliers, there are a few other ones as well, so those have got included as well. So those coins have been made, they've been put in a box, they've travelled across Europe, they've come to Verulamium, they've sat in a storeroom, they've been paid out to somebody, he's taken them back to his villa, he's put them in a box and hidden it up on the rafters somewhere, and then at some point thought, that's not safe, I'll go and bury it in the countryside now. So those coins have travelled geographically a huge way, but they've never really gone into the marketplace. They've never moved around and rubbed on, around with other coins in purses, because with these being good quality gold coins, the metal is so soft that it would start to wear off. And this is the one exception. This is the one gold coin we have where we have quite a lot of wear, and we still have got mud on it. But you can see these are the brother emperors sitting side by side wearing their togas, and you can't see the drapery because most of the high level of that coin is worn away from rubbing against probably other coins of some kind. So we have this single coin of Valentinian, Valentinian II, that has actually circulated really quite widely and got much more heavily worn. So the way I said that these coins aren't being used, this coin has. This coin has been in people's pockets and purses and has moved around. And probably, if anybody wants to do a dissertation or a PhD on coins, that is probably the most interesting one to sort of look at and see more about how Roman coins are being used than the other ones. But it's a very significant hoard. It's in Roman terms, it's of extremely high value, and we are hopeful that we will have it back with us end of this year, maybe next, and hopefully it will be going on display in the museum soon. You'll all have to come in and have a look at it in the flesh. Right, thank you very much. Thank you.